Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I'm joined by Janelle Miller Moravek. She's an executive director, mental health advocate, and seasoned nonprofit leader who really unexpectedly found her calling in the world of behavioral health. And so we chatted a bit about her own journey and just being in that space of behavioral health, nonprofit, her building out the space where she works and she educates people around mental health and specifically behavioral health, the challenges our healthcare system has when it comes to helping people behavioral health, and also the opportunities that are available for professionals and individuals in this space to just really make a world a better place by helping us address some of our behavioral challenges in the workplace, in schools, and so on. So she's really passionate about this topic. I think it's an important topic to cover because, as we talk about careers and business and work and all of that, mental health, behavioral health, things that we deal with as young adults and then later in our careers are so essential to success in our careers. So I think it's all related. I think it's important to talk about these topics and understand the resources that are available to us as individuals and also as companies. So enjoy the conversation. As always, please subscribe, comment, share, and come back for more. Janelle, welcome to the Shift podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am too. We're going to talk about a very important topic that is not only close to my heart, but also something I try to kind of bring to light, which is around mental health, around all the different things that impact us as human beings today. Wellness is a big part of kind of my everyday practice. I've gone through my own hard times and I've gone through my own resolutions with it and so on. But I think it is something that people face quite often. And I think it's an important topic to keep talking about. So I'm really curious around your journey as mental health advocate and somebody who's just kind of a translator in that space, who's who wants to bring some of these conversations forward in the nonprofit space and beyond. So let's start with just kind of like what got you into this world. Why does it matter to you? Like out of all the things you could have put your energy to, why this?
That's a really good question. And I actually landed in this space a little bit by accident. So I'm a fundraiser by background. And I was wanting to start a family and not wanting to work 60 hours a week and do a capital campaign. And I live up in Lake County, so a suburb of Chicago. And those fundraising jobs that are part-time they're not a lot of them. And so when I found one, it was with this small little counseling center and I took it. I can raise money for anything, right? So started there, and that was all the way back in 2000, and grew the program, became a really strong advocate for the work that the organization did, had my own adventures in mental health along the way, became a parent, was a consumer of services, not at my organization, at others, right? And then when I stepped in this space as the executive director in 2009. Since then, I've been doing more and more around trying to translate for our community, what does the system look like and how can our families access the care, right? My organization's all about accessing care. And it's not just stigma and affordability and languages spoken and geographic access, it's also knowledge. It's knowledge about how to seek help and where do I start and what do I do next? And the behavioral healthcare system is not like our physical healthcare system. So it's in fact, I wouldn't necessarily even call it a system. It's more like a scatterboard of providers all operating really independently. And so I've tried to shift from helping people one-off navigate that care to being like, okay, let's go all in and help people understand this really broken system and how they can access the services when they need them. So that's a little bit how I came to be where I am today and what I'm really passionate about in this moment.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more, because I'm not as familiar with, I've never really was seeking services, and I'm not as familiar with like the behavioral, the access to behavioral providers or whatever, I don't know what they're even called. So tell me a little bit more about the differences between somebody who's just looking for a regular physical doctor, for example, right, versus somebody who's actually trying to look into some behavioral challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like our healthcare system, especially on the physical side, you have your medical providers, you have your specialists. We kind of know, how to find those folks. And then we also somehow along the way in life, we learn when do you visit an emergency room? When can you go to like an urgent care? When can you just wait at home, maybe wait until the next day and call your regular provider? We kind of develop that literacy about levels of care. But
Mm,
then when you pivot over to the behavioral health care side, we don't have that same literacy around wh- when am I needing a crisis care versus when am I needing, really just coping skills. Like, and
mm,
it's a whole system. So there's a whole bunch in between. And I think all urgent cares are the same. Like up here where I am, we have 3 or 4 major healthcare systems. They all offer urgent cares. They all function basically the same. You
mm-hmm,
can't apply those same assumptions to the world of behavioral health care. So, one outpatient clinic might operate and treat things that are very different than another outpatient clinic and different I, I would say crisis level providers have different scopes, different target populations. You might land in one um, intensive outpatient program that is really meant for people with an eating disorder, or you
mm,
might need one that's for a substance abuse issue. But what if you're just looking for depression? So
mm-hmm,
there's not this, like, you can't apply the same rules and the same assumptions about the behavioral health levels of care. And there is
mm,
no major system. The typical consumer in behavioral health, they will kind of zigzag back and forth between a hospital system, an independent provider, a community health service, and they'll use all of those. As opposed to in a behavioral health care system, you might stay in your same, I don't know if you're North Shore, Northwestern, Endeavor, right? You might stay in that same system. That doesn't work in behavioral health because those systems don't exist.
mm.
So, yeah, it's an
Interesting. It's very
it's
complex.
interesting. It is very complex. And then if you're a
Yeah.
consumer and you're trying to navigate this because you're in a crisis, it becomes all that much more
Mm.
difficult. And so that's to me is a huge problem.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because what at least the some pieces that I do hear about the mental health care system is that there's always a shortage and it's like there's
Mhm.
never enough and sure there are different tools like BetterHelp, for example, like a therapist tool that people like it's an online tool that people can use. I don't know how effective they are. I mean, people say good things. I've used it one time for my own purposes and I didn't find it was I just felt like it was very transactional. And I don't know if my therapist, she was necessarily great. And I wonder, and anyway, so part of me feels like getting access to certifications and being a therapist and mental health provider is quite accessible. But at the same time, there's a huge shortage of these providers. And on top of that, the huge shortage of quality providers.
Yep.
And I wonder, like, why is that?
Whew. I don't think we have enough time to totally go into all of that. It is a system level challenge. And so where I am in Illinois, Illinois has the workforce to meet 24% of its need. 24%.
Wow.
That is not enough. And the shortage was identified all the way back in 2018, 2019, so way before COVID. And
Mm,
then COVID happened, and you saw a lot of providers in the behavioral health, especially in the outpatient space, leave. They left the field entirely. They burned out. It was really hard, right? So all of the providers were dealing with their own issues, their own families, and then they turned around and had to care for their clients. So it was a really high burnout profession. And so now
mm,
we're in even worse case. On the one hand, I will say there's a shortage. At the same time, what is really exciting is that you are starting to find behavioral health professionals everywhere. So you're starting to see them embedded in schools, in
mm,
emergency departments, right? You have them on staff. They're there to facilitate. We're seeing them ride on ambulances with police officers. There are these new things called living rooms that are, I mean, they're not super new, but they're relatively new, and they're popping up as a place to go that's not an emergency department, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
more just a place where you can go and seek support if something is more than what you can handle. You're not equipped. You can go and get a referral. And so you're seeing a shortage, but then you're also seeing some really creative solutions to this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And but if people don't know where those are and how to access them, right? It doesn't do us any good. So, I mean, we see them increasingly. You have faith leaders who
Mm-hmm.
have counseling backgrounds or are getting coaching on how to help the members of their congregations. You have in schools, not just your usual school social workers, but you might have a counselor who's embedded there, seeing kids on a daily basis. You increasingly have them in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And because we know that mental health is one of those foundational pieces that if you don't address your mental health and don't have good mental health, you can't succeed and thrive at school, in your relationships, and at work. I mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
stat to you before we jumped on, right? The cost of behavioral health to our economy today is $600 billion annually. Like that's a huge number. That's more than cancer, diabetes, heart disease combined. Yet we don't have really great solutions yet.
Mm-hmm.
We're working
Does,
on it, but
yeah,
we're
does
not there
that
yet.
sorry to interrupt, I just want to
Yeah.
dive deep into that stat. Is that inclusive? Like, what does it include? Is it how much companies are spending, how much productivity is lost? Like, do you have any more detail around like what is the cost
Those are
under?
both direct and indirect costs. So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to see that the direct costs are about 280 billion, and then
Mm-hmm.
the indirect costs of, time off, lost productivity,
Right.
it's about another 320 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, I know what pulls people off of their work. It's not just their own mental health. They're also attending, right, to the well-being of their kids. And when those kids aren't well, you have parents who are home from work. And it's more than, a fever. I'm going to give them some Tylenol and they'll be okay to go back the next day. It's a little more complicated than that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the young people kind of coming up right now is like a whole thing that I think it's a whole other podcast that I would love to talk about someday because I think they're just struggling so much. I read a book. It's here somewhere. I forget what it's called now. Of course, it slips my mind. It's Anxious Generation.
that's a great book.
Anxious Generation. You read it, right? You know what I'm talking about. So,
Yeah.
well, yeah. So, what is the did you like it? What did you think
Um,
about it from a mental health advocate perspective? I'm just curious.
You know what? I have not read the book, but it's on the shelves of many of our counselors at work,
Okay.
and we talk about it a lot with our parents. I think that, yeah, it's a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast conversation.
Yeah.
Um, this ability that we have of ourselves, right? When you think about our journey and how we are equipping ourselves to succeed and to thrive in as adults, right? In
Mm-hmm.
our life, like how to have relationships, how to find meaningful work, how to play. That starts when you're really young and
Mm-hmm.
right, you're learning the vocabulary. You have parents who are coaching you. Oh, that you're feeling this. Let's put some words to it. And then how do we ramp down? As our world has ramped up, like the screws, right, keep tightening, and it's a more and more fast paced. I think we have anxious parents. Anxious parents lead to anxious kids.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real disservice when we do not allow our children of all ages that unstructured time so that they can sit in the discomfort of themselves
Mm.
and find comfort there. That self-soothing, that is the building block of resilience. And
Yeah.
so when we have really structured schedules for our children and we don't allow them, that time to decompress, to be uncomfortable, to be bored, to
Mm-hmm.
figure things out, that is a gift that we're depriving them.
Yeah.
Um, so that later on they don't have those skills, and yet we're expecting them to perform at higher levels.
Yeah.
So it is a whole nother
Yeah,
podcast
we'll save it for
conversation.
another conversation. Yeah, no, but I think I like the call out that anxious parents do produce anxious kids. That's
Oh
spot
yeah.
on. When you do you have any like kind of maybe themes that you see or stats around what is the biggest behavioral cha or like top three behavioral things that people tend to seek? Like, is it depression, right? And that could be like a number of things under depression. Is it eating disorders? Is like, is there some
Hmm.
top like three things that people seek?
Easily. I would say in 80% of the cases we see here in my practice are anxiety,
Mm,
depression, or a combination of both of them, and also what we call sort of an inability to adapt to change.
mm,
So this, something is a change has happened, and the person of whatever age, because we see across the lifespan, can't adapt and needs to get some coaching and build some tools around how do I adapt to this new normal that my life has become. And it could be something as major as a divorce, but it could also be starting a new school or going into a new schedule. Um,
mm,
it's and right now, right, you're back to that whole resiliency and being able to, right, cope and exist in this discomfort.
mm,
And that's a skill that we're just seeing a real lack of that across the ages, across the lifespan, all
mm.
ages.
Um, I'm curious in your practice or maybe some of the things you've seen. So, as I mentioned, I'm a huge like wellness enthusiast, and a lot of the kind of stuff and research, the research that I'm reading and other things, a lot of more data coming out around impact of food on our levels of anxiety, on our levels of just how we feel in general, like just the amount of crap that we have in our food system. So I'm curious, like, do you guys solve for that? Is that something you talk about with your patients, or like what? Or if you don't, then like, what is your personal opinion on that?
Yeah, we don't. I would love for us to solve for that at my practice, and to have a nutritionist on board. We do not. A lot of practices do, though, and I think they're really helpful. As a mom, I know I have a son who is ADHD, and his diet is always a thing, right? He's going to go for those sugary snacks that are going to give him that rush, right? So an ADHD person needs stimulation in order to be calm. And so that's how we give them stimulants, right? So we're stimulating to achieve calm. Activity is a great thing as well. So by bouncing up and down or running or moving around or fidgeting, right, that's providing a stimulus that is actually calm for
Mm,
that person. But you can also get that from food, right? From those sugary snacks that are giving you that stimulation. So for example, getting my son to eat, protein and complex carbs that are going to stay with him he's
mm,
18 now, but it's been an ongoing fight because he'd rather eat goldfish and get that really quick sugar rush. But I
yeah.
know that's not going to help him in the long run.
Mm,
Um, and so my kids laugh. I'm the one who's sneaking the vegetables in everywhere. And but it's that, right? You have to for me, I have to sneak them in because his diet, it does impact his behavior,
yeah,
just
yeah,
like sleep does. So I feel
yeah.
like food, sleep, those are some of the systems that we set up in our lives. Like when I think about even my work personally, I try to set up systems so that I will succeed. And by that, I mean, I try to have a manageable workload, not too much. I try to allow for and plan my schedule so there are breaks in my day. Um,
Mm,
and it's important that we do that for ourselves, but also for our kids. Um, Setting up those systems of reasonable, sustainable work, allowing respite and rest, those all, it's not an immediate impact, but
mm,
you'll see it down the line, as you're able to sustain and you're resistant, right? You have really good resilience then.
mm.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
In your work and kind of exposure, what are your thoughts on kind of alternative ways to treat anxiety or PTSD, like like whether it's there's a lot of research again coming around psychedelics and these sort of things. They're doing a lot of work with veterans and mental health in veterans. Is that something is that something like which side are you on, I guess, on that? If there's a side, or there's a side, but just like what are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a mental health professional. I came up in fundraising, and
Yeah.
but I know enough. I also know that it is a really young field. Like the field of behavioral health is still evolving with all that we're learning. When you think about, it was only in the 1960s that in this country we were shutting down the psychiatric hospitals and encouraging people to live with their mental health issues in the community and to seek
Mm,
outpatient help. When you think about it, that's a relatively short period of time, and we're
yeah.
learning more and more about the brain, and all of these new treatments are coming up. I do know that the VA does amazing work in pioneering new treatments. CBT. A
Mm-hmm.
colleague was telling me, he works for the VA now. CBT came out of the VA. So anytime, I mean, when you give, when you fully fund and provide systems with the solid footing they need to innovate, you get really great things. Um,
Mm,
and so EMDR, which is it's the eye movement. It's a great
mm-hmm.
trauma treatment. 10, 15 years ago, that it was new and groundbreaking, and today we know it's very effective
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
treating PTSD and helping folks move beyond an episode. So
Yeah.
there are new treatments coming out all the time. I think allow the space for that innovation and to try it, and remember that this field is is a baby field, really. Um,
Mm.
when you think about leeches back in the hundreds of years ago, our leeches were the electric shock treatment, right, of the 60s. It
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, if you think about it, it really wasn't that long ago at all. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's spot on. Yeah, I just see a lot more research coming out of like, some of the kind of really solid places around the benefits of these alternative things. So I'm really curious how that's going to turn out because I think again, with healthcare, it might actually make it more accessible and available for people through these alternative ways versus going through the very messy healthcare system that is, not very effective, it seems anyway.
I still would encourage folks to work within the system,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to want to have that guide, that Sherpa who's guiding you in the journey. And
Yeah.
it shouldn't be incumbent on the individual to understand all the treatments, right? Providers should be guiding, suggesting, understanding this is effective for what you're dealing with. I think about when my kids needed braces, and the pediatric dentist gave me a list of 10 orthodontists. And I looked at him, I'm like, I'm not calling 10 orthodontists. Like, he goes, no, you're right, you're not. Because what your kids have, these two ones deal with. So you're going to call those two and get quotes. That's what consumers of behavioral healthcare need. They
Mm,
need, right? Okay, yes. I mean, go into psychology today. They have this awesome therapist finder. There are hundreds of thousands of therapists. How do you
mm,
find the right one for you? Like, that's and I think you still want to have someone on your side because those are trained professionals, right?
yeah,
They've studied that, they know, and they're not going to solve your problems for you. What they're
right.
going to do is they're going to guide you on how you can solve your own problems.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
they'll also know, when do you need more? When do you need less? When do you need something else?
yeah,
When do you need medication? Doctors are also great resources, good places to start.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, that definitely no, I totally agree with that. And yeah, and just to be clear, I'm definitely not anybody who's listening, I'm definitely not advocating for you to go take your own mental health in your own hands if you're really struggling. Obviously, consult a professional, even if it is through alternative ways, but consult a professional in that space.
Well,
You know.
there are lots of tools out right now, Elena.
Right.
There's all kinds of screenings. You can go to
Mm-hmm.
Mental Health America's website, do a screening. You can go to my organization's website, take a screening, and that
Mm,
will give you a sense of, you know, how am I like where is this fitting in? Am I mild, moderate?
mm,
So a screening is a great first step. At your checkup, right? Hopefully, we're all
yeah.
doing those annual checkups. It's another great place to just have a check-in. There's new legislation that came out in January that now every insurance is required to cover at least one mental health sort of assessment evaluation. Use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just like you would any other screening. Go ahead and get that done. And I will
Mm,
also say, if at any point you're not safe, get yourself safe, right?
yeah.
Call 988, call that crisis line, go to the emergency department if that's what you feel like. Do not hesitate to use those resources.
Mm,
Better safe than sorry. Um, but again, I feel like if someone's feeling not safe or that their child isn't safe,
mm,
right? Definitely engage those right away. Um, the 988 is an amazing resource that we now have nationwide. In my county, Lake County, when you call 988, you're connected with a crisis worker. And if they can't resolve and help you on the phone, then they're going to send someone out to you. And it's a
mm,
team of 3 people, wherever you are. They'll send you out, they'll go out to you and do that assessment and stay with you till you get where you need to go. So
mm,
there are some really great resources out there. No one should
yeah.
have to walk alone or figure this out alone. But you do
Yeah.
have to know where to start.
I think it's the next. I think that's where a lot of people just get stuck. They feel like they don't know where to go. They feel alone. They don't have the information, education around it. So I really hope, there are, let me ask you this maybe for people who are listening to this who want to get in mental health work, who want to
Mhm.
contribute, who is listening, this is like, actually, I want to get into it. Like, where do they start? Like, if they want to, maybe they already have a therapy degree, or maybe they already have some skills that they want to kind of help the community in their area, where would they start?
That's a really great question. We need a lot of behavioral health workers, right? So the system is very much like the teaching system in that the license is by state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in recognizing that we are in a workforce shortage, a lot of Medicaid organizations that they've opened up the doors to folks who might not have a license. So young people I love young people. They're right. They're going to change our world. They um, they can try things out and they can get started. There are new certifications. You can do this work at a Medicaid organization if you have a high school degree, if you have a bachelor's degree. Look
Mm,
for jobs like a caseworker or a support specialist. If you have lived experience, like
mm-hmm.
that's super valuable. And you
Mm-hmm.
can get a certification that's a recovery support specialist. And then you can work in the Medicaid space. So there are a lot more opportunities that are
Mm,
there for folks who have an interest in helping people. And we need people. We need people um, from all walks of life. We need
mm,
young and old, men and women. We need people of all colors because we need our workforce to reflect the diversity of the community we serve. Because we know that when you shut that door and you're having a conversation and you want to help somebody, the relationship is key, and we're more likely to get better care from someone who looks and sounds like us.
mm.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Of
Yeah,
course, we relate to people that are more similar to us, and we're more
yeah.
willing to open up and so on. That's pretty standard. No, that's really helpful. That's really great. Where can people take the quiz? You said you have something on your, or like an assessment on your website
Yeah.
to kind of
So,
identify where they are.
yep, there's screenings. And
Yeah.
so, Mental Health America is a great website. They have a lot of screenings, and so does my organization's website, and that's counselingforall.org. Um, but again, just Google mental health screenings, and if it's Mental Health America or an organization that's local to you, it should pop up, and you can start there.
Yeah.
It's a really good place to start.
That's great. And last question for you. If you had
Yeah.
a one wish and a magic wand to transform the mental health space or the behavioral space, what would that be? What
Mm.
would you do?
Ooh, if I could had a magic wand, I would make sure no one's being left behind. My world would have space for everybody. Um, and we're working on it, but it's going to take us some time to get there. And so one of the things that we do at YFC is we constantly are thinking about who's being left behind, right? Who's getting who's having trouble getting across that threshold. Um, and we intentionally, right? That's equity. Reach out to them more. Honestly, I have covered by a PPO. I can pretty much go wherever I want for services. Not everybody has that luxury.
Mm,
So making sure that nobody is left behind.
beautiful. Well, Janelle, thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do. Thank you. It's been pretty interesting and insightful to just hear some of the things that definitely new to me. So, and I'm sure to my audience.
Awesome.
So, thank you.
Thank you. I hope this was helpful in helping people get started.